Welcome to BIA, Canada's top black media provider. Whether you're looking for shows on fashion, art, music, or simple lifestyle, we bring you the best content the black community in Canada has to offer and so much more. And better yet, do you have an idea for a project you'd like us to help you with? We provide equipment, studio, and office space, as well as a team of dedicated individuals to help you bring those ideas to life. So don't wait. Check out our new website at biamedia.ca for more information on how to contact us and start creating today. BIA Media, your way.
What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner and 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online conversation in the world for dads and fathers that is co-sponsored by Dove Men Care, and also co-sponsored by Dads Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And through that collaboration, I was part of a team last year that reached out directly or indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world. Blessed to have that opportunity. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We're broadcasting live on January 23rd. It is cold in Toronto again, but we're getting through it. Earlier on this week, was it last Monday? We had like about 16 inches of snow. So some people are still recovering from that snow, but we're good here. We're broadcasting live today and most Sunday afternoons. In fact, all Sunday afternoons now, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We have Black Canada Talking. What's Black Canada Talking all about? It's a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes and POVs on stories that are of importance to them. And we have a returning friend from, I like to say, the left coast on Black Canada Talking today. We're pleased and blessed to have, Dr. Lisa Gunderson back on. Let me give you a little background if you haven't got to know her yet or haven't seen her yet. Dr. Lisa, otherwise known as Dr. G in her communities, is an award-winning community leader, psychologist, and educator. She founded and operates One Love Consulting, which provides services to ministries, businesses, educational institutions, private public organizations in Canada and the United States, focusing on racial equality, systemic racism, and anti-Black and anti-racism. In British Columbia, she's a registered clinical counselor and an active licensed psychologist in California. She provides clinical peer results for persons working in the Indigenous, Black, and other racialized clients. She was elected in August 2021, to serve as VP for the English Federal Green Party, and is the first IBPOC person to hold the post. Known in her communities, she is very active in African Canadian communities. Two current areas she is working with is the Black Youth Empowerment. So if you watch Black Canada Talking, we had that little group on a few weeks ago, most of them, an amazing group of ACB youth, and they are amazing, on bystander intervention program for Black youth, and also working with ACB men in CSC. A former tenured U.S. professor, she has taught numerous at universities and colleges all throughout Canada and the United States, provided key subject matter expertise to the Ministry of Public Safety and the Solicitor General during the development and implementation of provincial training on fair and impartial policing. Her two most recent pieces were You Can't Be Switzerland as part of an upcoming special magazine edition called Intersections, written by people who are currently incarcerated, and a chapter on Black Canadians for embracing cultural responsibility and social justice. You know what? We're going to stop. Well, there's so much more, but she does live in Victoria Sandish in BC with her two sons and partner of 25 years. She is the first generation African American and Canadian immigrant of Jamaican heritage. She loves movies, baking, anything basketball related. Okay. Traveling, reading, and playing dominoes. You're gonna six love me one day if I come out to the left coast? I hope not. So let's bring Dr. Lisa on. Dr. Lisa, how you doing today?
Oh, good. Hi, guys.
So next time I come on live with you, I'm gonna have my pack of dominoes just slide it out.
Absolutely.
So good to be in your presence again. How you been?
I've been great. It's so good to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you know what? You have a home here anytime. Actually, this is the third time you've been on in less than a year. You realize that?
No, I didn't realize that, but that's great.
Yeah, well, the more the better. The more the better.
Try to warm you all up from the West Coast here.
Okay,
I don't know how you deal with that cold out there.
I don't know either. I don't want to go there because I just tell you that 16 inches of snow or whatever centimeters it was just too much. Too much.
I saw it on the news. I won't tease you. We have no snow here. And
I know you don't, but once in a while you do get it though.
Once in a while we do, but I am sending out, on a serious note, blessings and prayers to all y'all who are in Toronto and so forth. That was a heavy storm,
So with all the stuff you have going on, before we get into our conversation about politics, what you been up to? Do you get time to rest?
Absolutely. It is the number one thing that we need to do, especially when we're being productive. I'm using your term, not
positive productive. Yeah.
Positive productive is we have to care for ourselves, right? Because if we don't care for ourselves, then we can't care for others, our community, the people that we care for. So I carve out a little bit every night and then a bigger chunk during the day. So this is the first thing I'm doing today. I slept until 1.
Lovely. No, I'm, you know what? One of the things that I was intentional about to start during the pandemic was getting a minimum of 7 hours of sleep.
Yeah. That is.
Doesn't matter what time I go to bed, but I got to get my 7 hours of sleep.
And that's exactly right. The time I go to bed is probably not the best time, but I get 7 hours of sleep.
Yes.
That I make sure I do. And as you get older, especially, I've tried a couple times where I get 5 hours and I wake up.
No,
like, I'm not 18 no more. It doesn't work like that.
Well, you know what? My mother told me when it comes to ladies, don't talk about age and weight. So I'm jumping right over that comment and I'm going to stay out of it. Let's talk. You know, we could chop it up for a while, but if you're going, they're having too much fun.
And I'm 51, by the way. I'm just going to own that because I got relatives who didn't make it there. And you know, you try to age like a fine wine. So I own that.
Okay, before we talk about politics, let's talk about that, especially during our pandemic.
Yeah.
We have had many members of our community not make it.
That's right.
Share some thoughts from your heart and about that, because, you know, I never disrespect our elders. So whenever we mention them, I want to give them the safe embrace space. What are your thoughts about those who are either going through or did not make it through this trying, especially, well, it's been hard for us forever, but it amplified in the last 2 years. What are some of your thoughts?
I think it's been heartbreaking. And a lot of people don't realize in Canada and also true in the US that African, Caribbean, Black communities, along with Indigenous communities, has been hit hardest with COVID. And that is something that for many of us, relatives that I've had to go to funerals for during this time period, one whom we suspect was COVID related. And I mention that because it's not just the loss of our community members to COVID, but it's also the loss that we've had of our relatives during this time and not being able to grieve them the way we can culturally grieve them. So if you had told me, for example, that I would have been to a funeral of my uncle who's in Jamaica via YouTube, I'd have told you you were ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, I'm grateful that I was able to watch the funeral, right? That's technology. But the idea that I couldn't be there with my family, holding hands and having that comfort. And so if you just extrapolate that to what's happening in our homes, many of our elders are isolated, especially those who aren't very adept with technology, for example.
Yes.
Many of us aren't able to engage in our community events. We haven't had a real community event in our community for almost 2 years. And
Mm.
that is really tough, especially when you live in places where there's not a lot of us and you need those gatherings to kind of re-energize. So some of us, I have a sister friend group, we've tried to do some online stuff. It's not quite the same. And for
Sure.
our youth, it's been particularly tough, especially when they weren't able to go to school, when sports and other activities were canceled. So those rates of depression and anxiety are real. And so what I'd like to say is, please, if you feel that the anxiety, the depression, know you're not alone, that you don't have to be a super person. You see all those snapshots sometimes on Facebook. Everybody's like, hey, I got this. Hey, I got. The average person doesn't have that. And
Right.
just know that you're not that way. Please reach out to somebody via phone or via text, a friend. Just try to keep some sort of connection. And in our communities, we're not necessarily big on seeking mental wellness help. But if you find that you can't, the regular things that you use to keep yourself up and elevated aren't working, please reach out to somebody and get some help for that. And have some hope. It is going to get better. We're on the shoulders of our ancestors who've been through so much. And this is just our trial, right? But we will get through it. I promise you, we will get through it.
You're setting yourself up for your fourth appearance now. No, but I want to have a conversation of individuals who do what you do in the consulting, help, emotional feel. So I'll be reaching out to you to have a round table about that, because this is a generational thing. It's not just going to stop. This is a generational
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. And we need to be proactive. And what I mean by that, there's likely going to be another variant at some point, right? So we need to start thinking a bit more about how we're going to prepare, and as a community, how we're going to work out to reaching each other and uplifting each other the next time it hits. And we're still going through it. Toronto, you all are in lockdown right now. It's, my heart just breaks for that. And this is where it becomes really, really important to remember each other. And if you have lost someone, there will be a time for you to properly be able to acknowledge that, and remember that time will come. But in the meantime, do take the time to grieve and to celebrate the life and the love that they gave you.
Wonderful. To be continued on that one. Audience, to be continued. But today we're going to talk about Black Canadians and politics. And when I first met Dr. G, if I'm allowed to call her that,
Yes, please.
I heard no inklings about her getting involved in politics. And I'm going to see if I can find it on my phone. A little while back, she sends me a text message about her getting involved in politics. I go, as we say, Dr. G involved in politics. So let's talk about your personal involvement, and then let's widen it to the macro. Why did you get involved in politics as a Black Canadian? Because so many Black Canadians either want nothing to do with it. Many Black Canadians don't even vote. Why did you take the jump in there?
I'll start with saying I've always been involved in politics in some way in the US. And when I moved here to Canada, I was very interested in getting involved in politics. Actually, the first trip I made when I came to visit Victoria is to the legislature. And I walked in and I said to them, what does it take to be like an MLA or something like that? And it doesn't take like, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. And they're like, you're from the US, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, because we have to
Okay.
have so much money to run and things like that. And
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, it doesn't quite work that way here. But what was interesting for me in my personal journey is I'm a Democrat in the United States, but here in Canada, it's like kind of split across. So in Canada, I'm like a mix between Green NDP with a sprinkle of Liberal. Like it's just all those people would probably fall under the Democratic umbrella in
Right.
the US, right? So for me, when I came, I was really interested in trying to get an understanding of how kind of the parties worked. And on the island here, what's really heavy is the Green Party and the NDP are really strong here. And I just wanted to start getting involved in different ways. And some people that I knew were involved and invited me to something called the Women's Congress. It was like a training for women who might be interested in going into politics one day. And we came from all over BC. And they had a bunch of different women speaking to us who were in various spaces politically from all the different parties, talking to us about what it was like to be women in the political scene. And that that training was just fascinating to me and really opened up a lot of things. And a couple of people started just to ask me if I'd be interested in doing some things.
Mhm.
So I actually was a pundit. I volunteered on a couple of campaigns. A friend of mine was running, so I volunteered on his campaign. Um, I joined my writing association, and behind the scenes, I was working on issues of diversity and dealing with how do we get involved in politics. And then I was a panelist on a variety of different things, part of the Diversity Equity Committee on the inside as well. And I was asked to represent or speak at a piece on proportional representation. So I was with John Horgan, and they had a representative, and Andrew Weaver and myself. And the four of us spoke with thousands of people around this idea of proportional representation.
Mhm.
And within ACB community, African Caribbean Black communities, we were having separate conversations about Black people getting involved in politics and what does that look like. So we're having those parallel conversations, no matter what your party or interest was, conservative, liberal, green, NDP, it didn't matter. It was about the lack of representation for us in politics. So I quietly have been involved in it for years, probably 8, 9 years.
Mhm.
I was involved, and then more visibly the past probably 3, 4 years as a news pundit and things like that here in BC.
What was the moment you decided to get involved, or what was the process? Sorry, what was the decision process to commit yourself to the Green Party?
Um, I think it was twofold. One, just a lot of people that I was around were in that realm, and also kind of in the NDP realm as well. And so I often, and I say this whenever I speak in green spaces and so forth, I see myself as kind of a combination of both still. And part of it was looking at the platform and their commitments to certain things like social justice, right? Looking at issues around the environment. While that is a huge piece, for me, it was really looking at that commitment towards us being a group of people who wanted to do politics differently and not just necessarily continuing the same kind of patriarchal, colonialistic type of movements, right? That I see in a lot of political spaces. But if you take a look at some of the different ways that they talk about what they're interested in, and the Greens is a global, worldwide movement as
Mhm.
opposed to just a Canadian movement. Now, how we go about actually engaging in living up to those different values and spaces is an interesting conversation. But for me, the people that I was around we're very much committed to trying to carve out space for groups that are historically not represented in these spaces, and understanding that linkage between things like health care and education and mental wellness. And what does that mean on a provincial and national level? And how important those kind of issues are. And trying to stick up for the average person and not necessarily people who don't have to worry about the things that many of us have to worry about. Layered, of course, with the idea of climate change. Um, for me, it's about racial justice, that is a key component. And without that, things like the environmental movement can't move. So I kind of saw for me that the way to get that moving is to get us more involved and what our issues are, put that in the forefront, because we are the first true environmentalists, Indigenous peoples, whether it's Indigenous to this country, Indigenous to the continent of Africa, etc. You know, that the environmental movement isn't it was started by us. I'm talking about Black, brown folk.
Mhm. Okay. I should have. I don't know if I should have asked this question before, but I ask it now. When did you decide, and who was the first person you told after you made a decision to say, "I'm going to make a leap into the political ring"?
Um, my family, first and foremost, because they're the ones that are going to be impacted the most. I was asked by the first time I was invited to the legislature was actually by Andrew Weaver back in the day, which is fascinating in and of itself. Um, and that was the first time I went and observed the legislature and just thought, wow, these people aren't acting right at all. I wouldn't allow my child to act like that. It was ridiculous. Yeah. And then I also got invited later on by some people from the NDP as well. But my family first and foremost. And then the question started to become, you know, am I thinking provincially? Am I thinking federally? In terms of the federal piece, that was Annemie Paul. And she called me, well, her campaign person called me. And then also she then and I spoke as well. And she and I had been speaking prior in the background before. So it was because she was thinking about running at the time. And I that was very inspiring to me. I was like, okay, that there's some other people who were very much in that space as well that I was impressed by. And that included as well, like Elizabeth May, who is a neighbor in my area as well. Sonia Furstenau and Adam Olson, who are provincially here. We're doing some amazing things. Adam is Indigenous, Sonia being a woman. So they right now are the two representatives here in BC. Sonia is the leader of the party. And I had some very good people that I knew who were also involved inside and outside. So it was a combination of those factors that made me think about running initially. Yeah.
Okay. When you and I think a good point, and maybe we'll land on it here, that what suggestions, advice would you give Black Canadians who are thinking of running, especially when you consulted family first, which I think is the best thing? Your family, how did those conversations go, and how important is it to have your family or your circle in your corner if you're a Black Canadian wanting to make that step into the political arena?
Yeah, I think it's critical because they're the ones that are going to be most impacted, right? As one of my closest confidants said to me, you're going to need somebody who's going to help you to remember to eat and to sleep. And I have children. So there's all these issues around, you know, I do drop off. So how does that impact that? You know, my kids are involved in activity and I'm going to be there. How does that impact that? So you're asking your family not only to be there to help support you that way, but then especially if you're running as a Black person, you're likely going to be one of the few or only or first. And so now you're going to be all over social media or in different spaces. And that means they are too. So at the time, my sons were they are teenagers, but in high school. So it's talking to like my oldest and saying, you're going to have to be a little bit more mindful of what you put out on social media, right?
Mhm.
You may be reading things about me that you're not going to like, right? And so it's not just what's happening inside, it's also that you're exposing all of them to whatever may come their way. And so it's really important that they're part of that. The second critical piece before putting yourself out there as well, though, is talking to other people who are where you're trying to be. So when I got the initial interest calls coming in, one of the first things I was doing was talking to other women who were either MPs or MLAs. Like, how is this really? Because you know how they have like all the pretty stuff, and this is,
Mhm.
it's like, tell me the truth. Like, what is it really
Yeah.
like? Are
Yeah.
you really working? How many hours are you really working? Is this a place where I really can get something done? Because I'm not interested in wasting my time if I'm going to just sit there and do nothing and not be heard. Right. And what is it like for you? Has a woman, has a racialized person, has a Black person? So I spoke to a few people who were already in it, right? Like Jenica Atwin, who has kids and so forth, right? Like I was speaking to people. And so part of that is talking and getting the real, what it's really like. That is a really important thing in your decision making process as well. And I'd gotten called by the Liberals before Christmas, for example, to
Mhm.
consider running in a situation where they knew I would lose. But the idea was that the person I was going to be running against was not going to run again in the future. And so it's kind of like building me up
Okay,
for the next
okay,
time. But
okay.
it's even things like that, like the strategy for you. So for me,
Yes.
one of the things that turned me off of that is like, okay, so first of all, you're calling me to run against particular person. And that already shows you don't really know me that well, because then you wouldn't know that part didn't make sense. But then you want me to run to lose. I'm not interested in that. I'm not trying to put in all this time to lose. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, I didn't like that. So part of it is really thinking about as well how the party is going to back you or support you or not support you, kind of where they see you in the larger kind of picture, right? That's part of the process as well.
Wow, people have to realize it's very strategic. It's
Very,
it's
yeah.
it's very, very, very. So you decided to run. How was campaigning like?
Mm.
Because
So I
again, a lot of people only see the outside.
yeah. So I had an interesting run because I decided to initially when I was going to run as an MLA, but I wasn't a citizen. And so my citizenship was supposed to be done, like you would say, 2 years prior. I could have been a citizen years ago, but I just didn't do it. And then
Right.
I decided to do it because it was holding me up for doing other things. For example, if you want to run for your school board, because we're talking about provincial and federal here, but there's so many other ways you can run. And so people were asking me to think about running for school board or city council or any of that. You can't do any of that if you're not a citizen. So I
Mhm.
got my citizenship, but it was just kind of in the works. So you didn't know when it was going to come. And then there was a snap election here in BC. And it caught everybody by kind of surprise, but I couldn't qualify, right? So it was like, okay, that's interesting. But then there was the federal election, and I have interests that actually go across both. And that's a different thing Canadian wise, which is very interesting. Is that if you're interested in education and mental wellness, that's provincial. But corrections and say international affairs, that's federal, right? So when I decided to run for the nomination for MP for my area, I really had some very key people who were very interested in working with me, and I wanted to work with them. So Christina Winters was my like campaign person, and I really wanted to create a campaign that was going to speak to our people and other groups who were historically underrepresented in the political sphere. Because I was like, if I don't get this nomination, I still want the experience for our people to be there. And so we were very methodical about how we went about doing that. We had a racial and equity lead, which no campaign had really had before. We had 2 youth managers that people hadn't seen before, in addition to a campaign manager and also, kind of the traditional pieces. And then I also had an ACB kind of advisory group separate from my campaign group
Wow.
to
Wow.
think about the ways that we were going to be interpreted. And that's something that people really don't understand. And the EDAs don't understand how to run a Black candidate, like what that actually means. And so I had that group of people as well. And they were my advisors, and they were also on there. My photography was an ACB photographer. We wanted to make sure in every aspect we were putting in people who normally do not get the opportunity. So I loved that about our campaign, and we were doing incredibly well. And I very much realized that we were going to win that nomination for MP, and then things kind of blew up within our party. And I started having some questions around, just being a part of if this is how I wanted to engage. And that was this whole set of things that were happening that I won't get into now, but just a lot started happening. And so I decided at that point and made the decision as a vote between everybody who was involved in my campaign to withdraw my nomination.
Wow.
And I did that. And to the surprise of the people who I was running against, because then that made, I'll give you a piece of advice somebody told me. This is for everybody. Never run for something if you're not planning on actually doing it, because life can do some interesting things. So when I pulled out, the couple people who were running against me never really thought that they would have to worry about actually running because they thought I'd win. But when I pulled out and I told them, their faces were like, what? I'm like, yeah, I hope you all ready. And so the other reason, after I did that, and I'm a very prayerful, faithful person, after I pulled out, 3 days later, I got a notification from my manager and said, hey, you have a chance to run if you'd like for the internal politics and change things. But we have 1 week to do it. And you have to get this many nominations, da 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 da. And I said, can you get the nominations? They go, we can get it if you're interested in running. And it's going to be an intense election, is about 6 weeks. It's going to be intense. It's nationwide. So unlike where I was running provincially, this is a nationwide election. My position meant Greens from across the country would be voting for me, as opposed to just in BC. We can do this. We have our team. Our team is ready to keep going with you if you're interested in doing this. So I talked to my family and we decided to go for it. And it was, we just kind of re-switched some things, and I competed against 3 white men. And I ended up getting more votes collectively than all 3 of them combined.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was a historic, run. Our president is Indigenous. So the first Ibok person to be president of a federal council, of a national federal party. I, of course, am ACB. Our vice president French, first person with a disability, who was elected as well. And we have a woman who was elected in the Treasury piece. So each of us represents groups that are historically underrepresented. And our current leader first East Asian, first trans person to sit and lead a federal party. So it is quite incredible to see
Yeah.
us all sitting there. And this was not where these systems were not designed for people like us. And we've already made incredible changes immediately. So yeah, we now have a Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Standing Committee. We're doing some immediate things. So it is it's quite a very interesting thing. And in my case, my term comes up in a couple of months because I was running in a position that was only for a year,
Mhm.
typically 2 years, but I was replacing somebody who had stepped down. So yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Thank you for sharing that victory story. How much did the organization that you built at the provincial level helped you to where you are at this position today?
Oh, it was tremendous. It was tremendous because everybody who was part of my team to help me in terms of national came from all the work I'd been doing provincially. And that's how I got to know people. And it was really, really important to have people that you know and who know you well. And so
Mhm.
this is not something where I decided one day and got up and did it, right? Like I said, this is, 7 years of other things that I had been doing and being involved in was very important. And it was incredibly important in terms of my ACB community as well, right? Like I'm not doing anything without the backing of my community. And what I found is that even if you weren't online with, say, the political party, one of the things in our community is that we're in line with the idea of getting us out into these spaces that
Mhm.
impact our lives so greatly, our
Mhm.
voices. So for me, I say to you, I don't care if you are conservative, if you are liberal, if you are non whatever, green, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is that if you truly have our community's best intentions for our community, if you really want to make differences in our lives, you have to get involved in the systems that make those decisions from our local level all the way through to the national level. We have to get involved because nobody is going to speak for us as well as
Mm.
for us. They're just not going to.
Wow. Wow. W- Why? There's so many questions here. Let me just re- for a second here. So, why is it important, especially during this time, that we get involved in the political? At least some of us get involved in the political process.
And you all have some elections coming up this summer
Yes, in Ontario.
in
Yes,
Ontario.
yes.
Absolutely. Um, I'm going to tell you why, because I think it's fascinating how people don't realize that the decisions that are made in these systems literally dictate so much of our lives. And what the system has done so brilliantly is made it in a way so kind of toxic and made it so unappealing that the powers that be then can just do what they want to do and we all just have to deal with it. And that is incredibly problematic. And that's true whether you're sitting on your PAC, like my parent advisory council group. So I sit on the PAC. It's incredible to me that in a high school where we have maybe 3,000 parents, right? 1,500 kids, that five of us show up.
Mm.
But we're the ones that make certain decisions that impact all those kids. And so we have been convinced that politics doesn't matter, that it's just this and that and makes no difference. That is what gives us our rights. And these are the things that make it possible for us to even be sitting here today. I happen to have here, because I was showing this to somebody the other day. Um, if you can see this.
Yep.
So this is groups of our people in walking from Selma to Montgomery in 1965 for voting rights, right? And they have 34 miles to go, and they're doing this by foot. And when you think about that, right, it says, when your belief is strong and your purpose is just, no obstacle can stand in your way. No matter, we're marching on the streets and we're doing all that, which we have to do. At at the end of the day, it's going to be the people inside those buildings, whether it's in your city hall, whether it's in your provincial government or in your national government, that's going to make some of those decisions and changes. We have to be part of those conversations. And whether you're on the front, so, here, or in the back, which we often forget, right? So if you're not somebody who wants to be out front, but you can be in the back, and there's so many people who are so influential in the background, there is a space for you. So it's critically important because these are the decisions that are going to impact our lives, our children's lives, our grandchildren's lives, right?
Yeah.
It's the way the system is designed right now.
So if someone wants to get in, where do you feel Black Canadians, I'm a Black Canadian, I want to get involved in the political process, where's the best place? Is it municipal, provincial, federal? Because a lot of people don't realize a lot of things happen at the provincial level, and so they may not need to do the national thing. Exactly. What are your thoughts on that?
It's all about thinking about yourself and what you love, like where your interests lie. Where's your passion? When you hear the news and you hear a story about City Hall doing something locally, does that get you fired up, or do you turn the channel, right? When you hear something about mental health, do you get, yes, I want to do something, or do you switch it? So the first part is kind of figuring out where are your interests and where does that lie? And you have to have that, because to be actually humble and to actually show passion when you're running, when you're campaigning, the difference between somebody who's trying to do this for a career versus somebody who's really trying to make a change is you can hear it when people are talking to you. And that's one thing, whether you like me or not, in terms of my politics, I am real. And people could hear that, and they could hear the passion. And I'm not trying to front or do anything like that. So think about what really inspires you, what areas you really want to change, right? You got to think about that. And then that will help you dictate where you need to get involved, because certain levels are in charge of certain things. So if you're interested in your city, then look at municipal politics, right? If you're interested in your school, your local school, think about maybe your local school board. When you think about City Hall, there's being a mayor, there's being a councillor, there's other things that you could think about doing. If you're interested in, like I said, maybe mental wellness or education, that's maybe provincial. So when you start to think about where you're interested in, that will start to help you kind of figure out. And if you're not sure, there are many, like I was part of our Planning, Transportation, and Economic Development Committee for my city, because I was kind of interested in what is city stuff like, and they're always looking for people to volunteer for those kind of committees and so forth. And that's a good way to kind of get a feel for what it is that you might be interested in as well. Shadow some people, see what you're interested in, talk, pick up the phone and call some people. And we call them MLAs here provincially. They're supposed to talk to you. They're supposed to talk to you. So just say that you're interested. And then there's also some national organizations that talk about Black vote. And they keep, one of the things that they do is they keep track of all Black persons who are ACB people who are kind of running for different things. So I would actually Google, different kind of organizations in your province that may have interest in supporting ACB communities. So we have something national called the Operation Black Vote.
Yes.
Operation Black Vote Canada. And so they have, if you go to their website, I'm on their listserv, for example, like I just am interested in what they do. That would be an area to start. I also have done, I always like doing research before I get involved in anything, and I learned a lot that way. But it's good to learn about the history of Black folk within your province and in
good point.
space, right?
Very good point. Very good point. Very good point. Are you noticing more interest and engagement by Black Canadians in politics since you started your journey in Canadian politics?
I'd say kind of yes and no. The the no part is I'm still not really hearing about us on a big scale, you know? I suspect next month with Black History Month, all sorts of interesting things will happen and the parties will try to pull out something. Um, but in terms of yes, the yes piece is within our communities, I have seen a lot more conversation. There's a lot more panels, there's a lot more discussions, at least here in BC, about how we can get involved and in different ways. This past election, like I said, they had speakers for all the major parties and really trying to get us involved. What's unique and interesting about Black space in politics is that many of us are coming from countries where being part of politics is either seen as negative or is it has kind of dirty aspects to it, like people are bribing people or other things. In other words, being a politician isn't necessarily a good thing. And one of the things that I learned being part of these discussion panels is that if we want to get more of our community involved, we have to think about where people are coming from and their political experiences and how to kind of switch that up a little bit, that no, this is something that is worthwhile in getting involved in, even though it is still kind of dirty and stuff here as well. But I never had thought about that before. I was always taught, you know, get involved in politics, da 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 da. But we're a heterogeneous group of people who have very different backgrounds when it comes to politics. And that's something that's never really addressed about how to deal if you have a negative idea around politics, how to deal with that. So that is really important to have our own conversations. And then what it's like to run, I'll give you a quick example. If you're going to
Sure,
run,
take your time.
if you're going to run, for example, for a campaign, one of the things that many campaigns don't think about, and you have to tell your EDA, is have a little bit of extra money to have more signs. Why? Because it's likely that your signs are going to get some sort of racial epithet across it, right? We see it with our Asian Canadian counterparts, etc. And so when parties don't think like that, oh, yeah, I may need a different thing because people are going to scrawl stuff across that. Those are the kind of little things that people need to understand. But on our part, how are you going to protect yourself while you're running? So for me, I didn't look at my social media per se, right? I had somebody else who kept that. And things that I want to say, I say, and then it goes out. But I don't need to be sitting there reading people's mess if they're going to come down that way. So there are little things you have to think about to kind of protect yourself in these spaces. Yeah. So there is definitely more conversation going on within our communities, for sure.
It's really interesting. I'm just wondering, and I know you can only relate through the Green Party. How many parties have that infrastructure for someone who is Black, who wants to run, making them aware and providing the supports that, hey, your signs may get this, your signs may, you know, all those things. I don't, again,
Oh,
go ahead.
I will tell you.
Go ahead.
And I know it's the Green Party doesn't really do that. Neither does the NDP, neither do the Liberals.
Oh,
like,
wow.
That's one of the things I learned within the conversations within
Sure.
my own communities.
Sure.
Is hearing from different people who were running for different parties. And we all had that kind of same similar type of conversation around, hey, what is missing here? And that's what we're hoping that we can share with the parties to really be able to say to them, if you're going to run people like us, you need to listen to what our experiences are going to be and what that's going to be like. So I have heard different stories from different parties about people being invited in. So the parties want us, right? So they bring you in. And then an event happens. Let's say the murder of Mr. Floyd, for example. And then some parties very much will dictate what you have to say. That was one of the things that appealed to me about the Greens is there was less of that, right? Like they're not going to tell me what to say. But some parties are like, this is what you need to say. And one of my sister friends said, I read what they put. I was like, hell no. A Black woman would never say that about this. And she had to get into a tussle with them about that.
Wow.
Right. And so that was very kind of disheartening. And so I don't think we're at the point yet with many of the parties where they have gotten beyond, if you're trying to go beyond performative and really trying to make us part of the cake. So I like to use this example that we're not icing on the cake. Like if you
Right.
buy it, you go, oh no, we are the cake. Like we're the butter and the eggs.
You're
If
right.
we're not going to listen to our lived experiences and integrate that into your knowledge of the structure, this cannot work. And so I think it's fair to say that there is a lot that all the parties need to learn, not just running people like us, but other historically underrepresented groups as well, right? Because there's the intersections. You know, if I'm Black and Muslim, if I'm Black and lesbian, right? Like if there are all these other pieces, Black with a disability, right? There's all these pieces. They don't know what to do with us.
So, Dr. G, then you set up a very little dichotomy here then. We want to get more people who look like us
Yeah.
involved in these organizations that are not creating
For us.
safe embrace space. That's
Yeah.
you see where the conflict is?
Oh, but is that not our life?
Yes, but then what
Right?
can what so
It's
what
like
can
waiting
what
for
can
the police.
what can be done? What can that person who's interested when they get the reality check
Yeah.
hit them and turn away? And do we blame people say, no, I don't want to get involved because they're not making room for us? They
I'll tell you this.
won't create a safe embrace spaces inside their own arena.
So I will answer that in 3 ways. First of all, I would never tell somebody to stay somewhere where they feel like it's hurting their mental wellness and stuff, period. Whether it's the politics, the job, or whatever, you have to take care of yourself. And you have to have a certain temperament to deal with the systems this way. And if you don't, that is okay. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's just not the lane that you're supposed to be in. And there's no shame or guilt around any of that. And I think that's really important to say because I think sometimes we kind of put out this thing that if you really care, you'll do it no matter what. You'll put up with it no matter what. No, we all have a line and a boundary, and you have to honor that. So there's no shame in that. So if you need to bounce, bounce. The second piece to that is where we have to get serious within our own communities about helping each other. What I'm hoping is, and what before pre-COVID, is I wanted to do a similar kind of Congress like the one I did as a woman for Black folk, right? Like we need to get together and we need to help create systems to help each other deal with this kind of thing. And that's something I'd love to see us do more nationally as well. Like how the States has like the NAACP and things like that. We need to have something like that and a political branch. And then that branch is going to be having, pieces in provincially, but we have to have those conversations. I would love for us to have a national convention for Black politics, right? And we have to build those structures to also hold these structures accountable as we work on disrupting, dismantling, and abolishing those pieces that are holding us purposefully kind of away. So that's the second thing. We have to get serious within our own communities. And I think many of us are, but we have to work more together and not in silos. And we have to figure that out because you themselves, right? The third piece is for those of us that are in it. We have a responsibility to do things differently, to create, shine light on the parts that aren't working, and then create spaces so more people will come in and feel more welcomed. That's on us. So if we're honored to be able to be in certain spaces, then we can't just sit there and be like, okay, cool. We have to do things differently. And that's what, at least I know, when I'm done in 3-4 months, I know that I'm part of something that's going to be there long after I'm gone. That's why, like, creating a JEDI committee, the Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, is not an ad hoc. It's standing, meaning that it will be there for in perpetuity, right? Like requiring a review from an outside source to look at anti-Semitism, anti-racism, all that stuff, to do a study on all of those things. That's something that is in my power to help with my colleagues and convince them, which when you have a group like I do, you don't have to convince anybody of anything to make things happen. So whether you're sitting on the school board or in city council or in your provincial legislature, once you get into those positions, you have a responsibility then to make it better than the way you left it. And finally, we need to talk to our youth. See, politics isn't something you just do. It's got to be part of your understanding that it is your right. And we need to ingrain that into our youth. And that's where I get excited. So what are we doing talking to our youth about how they can change these systems collectively, right? So go speak to young people. Go get them excited about this. It's young people who really change things in a certain way, right? So we need to talk to our children and not perpetuate the idea that this stuff doesn't matter. It matters, you know?
One last conversation piece before we shut down.
Yeah.
Is there a need for a Black Canada Party?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think there is a need for a Black Canada political grouping.
Okay.
So in each of these, and you see that in the US, right? But I think we need to see something like that, not only in each of the parties, but collectively. And I think that's important because I think the reality is that we are such a heterogeneous group of people that I think you see Black people across the political spectrum. So it's kind of hard for me to imagine what a Black Canada Party would look like. Do you know what I mean? Because, but what I can see is that no matter where you are on the political spectrum, that all of us agree to certain things that need to happen in our communities. And so whether it's similar to, right now it's the International Decade of African Descent, and it's going to end in a couple of years.
Yeah.
But there's some consistent things across the spectrum that need to be done. ACB communities are overrepresented in corrections. We are dealing with healthcare bias, right? I don't care, again, if you're liberal, conservative, NDP, Green, whatever. We can all agree on that needs to change. And so what I'd like to see is more of a collective conversation amongst Black politicians, no matter what level they're at, to deal with some of these issues, the systemic racism that's happening across our country to all of us. That we need to do. And I think if we could do that, that gives us a certain amount of power here. And then those of us individually who are in various parties can draw on that to maybe help influence what's happening within the party structures themselves. But those party structures also have to really analyze themselves. And I would ask every party to look at, anti-Black racism within every one of their parties. And what are you going to do about it? And a quick example, why do we have things like whips? If I ever get in provincial or federal, think about that. We have majority whips. That just tells me there are not a lot of Black people in these spaces because nobody's going to talk about whipping me. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's like, those are even just a little bit of the language, majority whip.
So for a lot of people, they may not know what whip is. Can you tell them what that means?
So in our government, you have people who have certain positions. And one of the ideas is that you have a person who's in charge of making sure everybody kind of gets on the same page for a particular, issue. And so that person's official title is the whip. They are the majority whip.
Mhm.
If they're the majority, opposite the majority group, or the minority whip.
Mhm.
And historically, the whip, uh, that's what they used to do to animals to bring them
Yeah. Yeah,
together,
exactly. That's
right?
why they call it that. Yeah.
That's why they call it that. And then for those of us, and not all of us in our communities have an enslavement background, but many of us do. I do. That was one of the primary ways that they broke us when when we were kidnapped and stolen
Yeah.
and brought over to the West Indies and into North America,
Yep.
is we were whipped. And so if I brought a TV in front of the, legislature and showed some whipping, and then you're going to sit there and tell me that you're going to whip me. So these are the kind of things that have to change. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. Well, you've
Yeah.
covered people who are interested, people who aren't interested, but giving them opportunities to be involved. So
Yes.
before we let you go, I know you have one or two things you want to share with the audience that are somewhat non-political. So certainly share them with us.
Sure. First of all, I want to say thank you again for the opportunity.
My
So
pleasure.
appreciated. And I really, again, encourage all of you to really think about getting involved in your city, in your schools, etc. We need you. We need your voices. Uh, we have a group called Black Youth Empowerment. Those of you who may have seen the episode a couple weeks back, and wanted to let you know that this is a group of Black youth who have created a workshop on bystander intervention by Black youth for Black youth. So this is for Black youth who are in high school, grades 9 through 12, who may deal with certain microaggressions and things that are happening to them in class by teachers, by other students, etc. And so a group of youth have gotten together with the Public Health Agency of Canada and the Victoria Sexual Assault Center and created a workshop where they're going to teach youth how to deal with those kind of situations and how to care for themselves. This is a free workshop. It's open nationwide, and it's going to be held on February the 21st. And February 21st from 3 o'clock Pacific time. So that's about 6 o'clock Eastern time for a
Right.
couple of hours. And there will be information about how to go ahead and register your youth around that. And we really hope that you go ahead and sign into that. In addition, right after that at 5:30, By Group is going to hold a poetry slam. And this poetry slam is going to be a contest. There is going to be financial prizes for first, second, and third place, but it's a way to highlight and shine Black youth who are doing spoken word. So just kind of look out for that. The By Group has an Instagram account that you can follow, and you can I guess we have that from before.
Yeah, I'll
Go
make
ahead
sure I'll make sure that
and
that information comes back
yeah,
when we post this up. So no problem.
that'll
Well,
be great.
and if you can send me offline the information about that event,
I
we
will
can
do
also
that.
include it.
I will do that. So we're really hoping you all will engage in that. In addition, we have something called Intersections, which is a magazine in collaboration with the Nanaimo African Heritage Society group. We have a group of different people who are currently incarcerated who have done some poetry and have done some artwork, etc., from various IBOC groups. Many of them are part of our communities, and they are sharing their voices. And this particular magazine is going to be passed out throughout the country in different institutions, I will say. And the idea is that the funds that are going to be raised from that are going to be going towards social justice. So just kind of keep a lookout. You will be seeing and hearing a little bit more, I think, about that next month. And that's supposed to be coming out in March. So There's
All
some
right.
exciting things happening.
You don't sleep. Well, you do sleep, but you don't sleep. Okay. Well,
I
Dr.
do.
G, yeah, Dr. G, thank you so much. I'll just have our producer put up, and there's that slow read. Nicely said, Dr. Lisa G. I'm going to research it tonight. Thank you. There you go.
Awesome. That's
And if our
awesome.
producer can put the website that you can, all things Dr. G, you can go to oneloveconsulting.com, and that's the hub. All right. Well, look, thank you for everything you have done,
Thank you
are
so
doing,
much.
will be doing. All the blessings to you and the families
Much
and everyone that you're
appreciated.
serving. And we will chat with you soon. Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Keep warm.
Bye-bye. Yes, thank you. Shall do. It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association, and I also host the only online conversation in the world for fathers and dads that is co-sponsored by Dove Men Care and Dad Central. As always, I'd like to say thank you for everyone who watched live or on the replay. It's appreciated, not taken for granted. You can catch me on other days of the week, Monday mornings and Friday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern time. I host something called a conversation called The Morning Vibe with Ryan Knight. And if you go to my Facebook page or my YouTube page, you'll catch it out there. And please subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show. We are very Google-licious. Would like to have you. And then on Saturday evenings, I host a conversation called State of Things with Aisha and Jill, where Aisha K. Staggers and Jill Jones provide their takes and thoughts on things going on in America, mostly America, socially and politically. So as always, I like to close off with this: live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Thank you to BIA Media for a great production job. God bless. Peace, well. Keep the faith and walk good.